And welcome back, everybody, to another Pickled Dragon Unscripted. I'm Matt, Pickled Dragon. And of course, we have the always talented Lovey Dovey. I said Lovey instead of Lovely, but we can go with either.
You're
Uh,
drunk, Matt.
huh?
I'm Dracoya, and today we have an interesting episode for you.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, I get, I never get emails from people who are like, hey, I really like that video. You know why? Because rage is always a much more motivating factor than joy, and that's a sad state. But I get emails that are like, why do you even care what WotC's doing, or why do you even care that the game has changed, or yada yada, and it's usually more colorful than that. But and to that I say I'm allowed to care, period. Like all of you are allowed to care. All of you are allowed your opinions, and 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 to that point, I have spent 40 plus years, closer to 45 years in the D&D world, fandom, whatever you want to call them these days. But Jacoya, how long have you been going on D&D?
I would prefer to plead the fifth,
Third 3.5.
since something around there.
So here's to you, Jacoya. When you've invested that much of your free time in a hobby, I think that we are allowed to have an opinion. It's much more so than somebody who just saw an episode of Stranger Things last week and said, I like D&D. So
Well,
there, that's what
yeah,
I think.
that's true. And you know what? There have been many more and louder opinions than ours that are based off of much less. So we're allowed
Yeah.
to have an opinion.
Yeah, and I think that we're always very well thought out and rational when we give our opinions. We don't just like off the cuff say things about WotC. We try to be evidence based, and we try to take a look at things and say something doesn't seem right here, or I don't think that's going to work the way they think it's going to work. But you know, recently we made a video discussing why the old timers are so invested in D&D. One person commented that they didn't think, and this was on that video, by the way, that they didn't think that the fans of the game made the slightest amount of difference during this OGL scandal. And I thought a lot about this, and I think that there is some validity to that thought. And you know, I think that it's uh you can see it in the fact that Wizards of the Coast, most companies, they're gonna like try to cast the widest net possible, right? And take any customer that they could get. And they
Yeah, I don't understand that, but okay.
Yeah, but Wizards of the Coast seems to be writing off the hardcore players, and when I say hardcore, I mean people who have stuck with the hobby for 20, 30, 40, 45, 50 years. I think that they've completely written them off. And I think that and a lot and before you say anything, like I know quite a few people who've played D&D as just as long as I have, who are
Okay.
were happy with the 5e 2014. But the design choices that they've made with 6e, I'm going to just start calling it 6e because that's what it
It
is.
really is.
Uh,
5.5, 60, whatever.
the design choices, from what I've been observed, and um, you know, they seem to be oriented to the shorter attention span, excuse me, high power gain focus, right? like we did a video, a couple different videos on the new spell effects in D&D 6e and
Yeah,
how
we
they,
did.
yeah, how they follow the Baldur's Gate 3 mechanics, which are absurd. Um, you
Well,
know,
and that I've said it before. I mean, and I'll say it again. This is my biggest problem with the new edition is that the builds are broken. Everything is homogenous and it all resembles some kind of like Marvel superhero. I feel like the new edition of Dungeons and Dragons is targeted towards a group of very young players who have never heard the word no because their parents thought it would be traumatizing.
yeah, and this group seems to, you know, it's the same group that grew up on Iron Man and all, you know, the Hulk and all that. And I think that's what they're gearing it towards, is that demographic. And you might say, well, that makes sense uh, because they're the youngest folks and they're going to be around the longest. But when you're talking like kind of short attention span folks, are they going to stick with D&D as a hobby throughout their lives? But I mean, it goes beyond that. Like the new Bastion system, which we've talked about, the new Bastion system. It's like a mobile game, you know. And
Yeah.
then obviously the focus on technology, VTTs, and the AI. I think the older gamers are not. They just don't appreciate that as much as the younger ones, I think.
I mean, you can blame them.
Yeah, but
And then actually, Matt was kind enough to pull up some of the demographics for us. So when we look at the demographics of the game, and this is as of May 2023, and this is what we got from WotC. 60% of Dungeons and Dragons players are male, 39% are female, and one identify as other. 60% are going to be hybrid players who switch between playing the game physically and online, and then 58% are going to play D&D on a weekly basis.
yeah, so if you look at this from like an age standpoint, 48% are millennials. And again, these numbers come from WotC,
Yeah.
but you know, it's their market research based on largely online stuff. But 19% are Gen X, 33% are Gen Zs, which I find extremely interesting because you would
That
expect
seems wrong.
you'd expect if the game were catching on really strongly with younger folks, you would
Hmm.
expect that there'd be more Gen Zers than millennials. But
Right.
millennials, I think, hit were hit with the Stranger Things bug early. But uh, a majority of the current D&D players, of the current batch of D&D players, started with fifth edition, which is, you know, I think that's very interesting. I mean, um,
Well, and that's we'll get into that because there's some polls that we pulled up. So we'll get into that. But I will say that when it comes to the demographics poll, this was pulled from an online poll. And it's kind of interesting because, who's generally online? Not really boomers, Gen Z, sure, millennials, okay. But, it's interesting that a lot of generations, I don't think this is accurate. And it's because this is clearly an online poll. And so it's targeted towards a very specific group of people. It's almost, again, I go back to whoever it is that's trying to come up with all of these like game plans for their marketing, it's very much confirmation bias. They created a system that was only going to target the demographic that they really wanted to target. And then they're like, oh, see, I was right. No.
yeah, that is an excellent point.
Thank you.
Excellent point, Dracoya. The confirmation bias it's a real thing, you know, and she's absolutely right. You know, like who's online the most and who's most likely to be a player of 5e, or not necessarily 5e, but an online player. Like they say 60% of the gamers reviewed were online. Well, notice that 0% of their demographics shown are boomers, And I
Yeah.
know personally lots of boomers who play 5e at the game store. They're older guys that came into D&D in 1975 with the original OD&D, and they just stuck with it all the way through.
Yeah,
So
I would say one out of every four players that I meet is a boomer.
it's I think that this you are so right about the way they collected their data. It is geared towards confirming the bias that they should be online with VTTs, because I don't think 60% of players play online, but I could be wrong.
No. So, and then I do want to go into like the graphs that we had mentioned. So, fifth edition 2014 sales have always been driven by Stranger Things and Critical Role. And we've got a lot of graphs that we can demonstrate that
Yeah,
point.
so
So,
we're
you want
gonna
to put up our
we're
first one?
yes, uno momento here. So we're gonna share the old screen. We got this graph here, fancy graph. This is our first one.
Yes. So this is the interest over time in Dungeons and Dragons. So it goes all the way from 2004 to like, is that like 2020? Yeah, 2020. So you've got 4E that's being released. Okay. And then you had a decline right before 4E was released. 4E was released, and then there's a little bit more interest, but it seems like the people who are interested in D&D before are already going to be interested in the new 4E edition. And then you have the 5th edition that happens. And that was interesting, and that created a lot of interest. And interest definitely spiked a little bit before 5E and then after 5E. But what really shot it through the roof was a combination of Critical Role and then Stranger Things. Critical Role brought up the interest quite considerably. If you look at this chart in 2016, the interest actually matches what you had in, I think that's 2000-ish, uh, from the very start of the chart. And then Stranger Thing releases, and then boom, it just went crazy after Stranger Things. Stranger Things.
Strange. Yes. 4E. That was a train wreck. So here's another graph that actually shows multiple seasons.
And this
Uh,
is Stranger Things specifically. So I did not make this graph, by the way. So I do apologize if you're like, Dracoya, what the hell's up with these colors? It's not me. Trust me, I do better. Anyway, so you can see the interest in the release of the seasons correlated with Dungeons and Dragons. So by the end of that season, or by the start of that season, like boom, it just skyrockets like crazy. And so I do think we're going to see another really large bump in interest for Dungeons and Dragons when the last season of Stranger Things comes out. The last season of Stranger Things comes out the beginning of 2025, and that will be the last one. So I think we're going to see another really big spike right around that time. After that, I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I theorize that it's probably going to lose interest over time, and then WotC's gonna just, can the whole thing and be like, "Oh, gee, I don't know what happened. I don't know why it didn't work out past a certain point." Idiots.
but we'll see. I think you and I think that they have a plan, though, uh,
That's true, and we're gonna get into
based
our
on some rumors that are circulating. This is just from season 4, the last season, the previous. The
Yes. So if you see it in the bottom, you've got, the D&D game rooms, and then you at the top, you can see other game rooms. So who's playing games as a whole, and then who's playing D&D focused games versus other games. And you can see the red and how it's risen over time. It goes higher over time. And this is also correlated with Stranger Things.
this
So,
this data comes from VTTs around the internet there. So based on I think Roll20 was one included in this, but yeah, I mean 72% after Stranger Things releases, there's a 72% usage rate of D&D 5e in among the game rooms. And then at once Stranger Things over and the hype wears off, it drops back down to the levels you see on the left here.
yeah.
So um I think that this last season of Stranger Things is really important for WotC. But again, I think we see that they, being Wizards of the Coast, have a plan. Numerous scandals, and we've talked about them endlessly, have put a dent in things, but they
Mhm.
still are the top dog. you know. But the OGL crisis gave rise and gave a huge breath of air to so many other third party, if you will, companies, and I don't know. Like I would imagine, I actually talked to somebody that runs Fantasy Grounds, which promo code Pickled get. Actually, I think it's Pickled 20, but you can get a discount over there at Fantasy Grounds, 10% off. Check it out. But in any case, I spoke to someone and they said that after the OGL crisis, they saw a huge dip in the number of 5e rooms, but after everything kind of calmed down again, it went up, but it never got back to where it was. So the launch of 6e, this correlating with the final season of Stranger Things,
Mhm.
I think is critically important to WotC. I think we're going to see Stranger Things merch everywhere, and we're going to start seeing like D&D bath towels and shit, just plastering it out there,
We've
right?
already
Because
got that.
this is the last dip in the well for WotC for Stranger Things, and
Yeah,
they're
I
counting on
definitely
that
think so.
that bump. They're counting on it.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I want to mention before we continue, speaking of Stranger Things and games, if you are going to a convention either this year or next, for those of you that live in the East Coast, I know that PAX Unplugged is coming up. It sounds like an amazing convention. There's going to be all kinds of board games and tabletop games galore. It is the ultimate heaven for nerdom. And if you are going, you're gonna want to go to Fox by Hobbies. Foxbite Hobbies has this really great backpack, really wonderful quality. It has enough room to put all your board games galore, all your miniatures, all your paints, all your fun. It comes with all these little compartments here that you can put all your miniatures in. It has all kinds of pockets on the side and in the front for any of your board games, miniatures, paints, paintbrushes, and general nerdum.
And it's not shoddy craftsmanship. That is very high quality material and stitching in that back.
Matt and I have a rule on this channel that if we don't like it, we're not gonna show it because our name means something and it's a great, great quality. So go to Foxbite Hobbies and use code Dracoya, 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 and you can get 10% off your order. Okay. So, the recent seasons of Critical Role have been less of a factor because they are moving towards their own system. And so it's going to be interesting to see, how that goes. But then here's our little conspiracy, Matt. Matt,
Yes.
um, there have been a lot of rumors swirling around that Matt Mercer is actually taking over for Chris Perkins, which we mentioned Chris Perkins in another video and how he kind of got moved around. And if this is true, is this WotC's attempt to bring Critical Role back to Dungeons and Dragons?
If they could get them back on board with 6e, then it would be, I think, a boon to their sales. Whole seasons of Critical Role pushing that product. Um, but well, who knows? You know,
Who
you know,
knows?
and I've seen plenty of gamers out there, brought in by Stranger Things, by Critical Role. People will disparage them. They'll call them casuals and worse things. But I believe this is the demographic that WotC is courting. I think they're kind of washing their hands of longtime fans in favor of what I call the phone app crowd. Like short attention span. Let's cut to the chase. Um, you
I think
know,
they're doing a poor job at courting them, let me tell you.
Well, I'm still amazed. When I go into the game store, if I run games or whatever, I'm still amazed at the number of people who come through there and who have they don't even know what the OGL is. Like, what does OGL stand for? Like they have no idea.
And maybe we need
And
to do another video on that.
I don't think they're watching videos. I don't. But what I do know though is that this new system 6E, the videos on how to make broken multi-class characters are flowing out, like the war priest fighter archer, where you could just like stack all the hit bonuses and never miss. Like shit like that. Like it's crazy to me that uh in the core books, like in the core 5e books, I fell in love with 5e just based on the core books. It was the subsequent releases later that really ruined it for me. Um, and I'm sure that somebody could go in and nitpick the core books, but typically when you're talking a new system with core books, you're not finding a whole lot in the way of just absurd builds, but it's already flowing out. Like the number of broken builds that I've seen around YouTube, I've been shocked because it's not just one or two.
I'm not.
And there's got to be a reason for that. Uh,
So, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that the demographics that we just mentioned are they completely skewed, or maybe that sounds about right to you? What do you guys think about Matt Mercer and the conspiracy that he might be roped in
yes.
to WotC's insanity? Let us know in the comments down below. Comment, like, subscribe, and use code DRACOYA to go to Foxbite Hobbies and get your backpack for your next convention.
Or brushes or pins. They have these cool enamel pins. You can see them in the banner and that's just a few of them. They got a huge selection.
But
Pretty cool
most
stuff.
importantly, guys, come back and have another round on us.
Woohoo! Keeping me honest.